Hi everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns and welcome to the final video for the Thistle Pocket Tote. So we left off the last video. We just completed our zipper panel closure, and now we're going to put all of the lining shell pieces together. So this is all pretty easy stuff. I just felt there was a bit too much for the previous video, so I split this up into the final video. Now, you should still have center marks on your two main body lining pieces. So you'll see I have them here and here, here and here. And then if I flip my remaining top band lining pieces, I have center marks here and here, and also have my arrows showing me which edge is the top edge of the top band piece. And then for the zipper panel, we do want to put center marks on this as well. So to do that, I just fold it in half this way. Let me take these out. So just folding this way, and then you want to you only need marks on the right side, but I like to do those at the top and the bottom edges. Like this. They probably don't show on camera, but there and there. And what we're going to do is take one of the main panel pieces, doesn't matter which one, and you're going to place this over top. So this is right side up and this is right side up, and we're just aligning those center marks, and then we are using some clips. Now I like to do this in 2 steps. You could technically go ahead and just place your top band and then sew all of them together at the same time, but I don't like to take a risk with layers shifting, so I like to do this in 2 steps. So I'm just going to quickly base this along the top edge first, and I'm going to use you can use 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch seam allowance. It doesn't matter. You're just quickly basting this together. Okay, so when this is basted in place, then we're going to take one of the top band pieces and place it over top. So these are both right side up. This is wrong side facing up. And I know that this is the top edge of my top band because I have my arrow here. So I actually want to place it where the arrow is upside down, because once it's sewn, it's going to be in the correct direction. So again, we're just lining up those center marks. Now you'll remember with the exterior pieces, a little bit of shifting is normal. I think my center mark on my top band is actually in the wrong place because it is not lining up quite right. So I'm just going to move it over. And like I mentioned for the exterior as well, don't worry if things do shift a little bit, because in the end it's really not going to make a difference as long as it's not more than the seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch off. So now we're going to sew through all 3 layers along the top edge here. This time we're going to make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. And we're using our usual seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so these are all sewn together. Now, I'm using vinyl, so I cannot press, but if you're using fabric, you're going to want to press the top band away from this main body piece. And then we're going to top stitch the seam allowance along the bottom edge. Now, because I can't press, because I'm using vinyl, I'm just going to go over to the machine and sort of finger press it and top stitch at the same time. So that's what it looks like now that we have this attached on one side. So now we're going to repeat exactly the same steps using the other main body piece and lining up those center marks. And then for this, we're just doing the quick basting stitch along the top edge. Okay, so that's basted, and now we're doing again the same thing to attach the top band. I probably got my center mark incorrect on this one as well, so if I did, I'll just adjust it. Yeah, it looks a bit off again. I'll just fix that. Okay, so now again, just sewing along the top edge here through all of the layers, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then again, I can't press, so I'm going to go ahead and finger press and then top stitch that seam allowance here along the bottom of the top band. Okay, so that's what that looks like now. And before we sew up the exterior edge here, the outside edge, we have to create our darts. And that is done exactly the same way as we did for the exterior darts. So you're just putting those straight edges together like this, and then we're sewing. I start 3/8 of an inch, curve out a little bit here, and end up with 1/4 inch seam allowance from the corner here. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other three. Okay, so we have all of our four darts sewn. So now we're going to sew up the outside edges, and we're doing exactly the same thing as we did for the exterior. So I'm going to start by lining up the important seams. So the dart seams, I like to line those up first and clip them. And I'm actually opening up their seam allowance when I do this, and that kind of helps me make sure that they're lined up. It's a little bit less important that these be lined up properly because they would be really hard to see inside the bag whether or not they were properly lined up, but I like to make that little effort. And then again, same thing here, we're lining up the bottom edges of the top band and adding a clip there. Now, we don't want this to get into the seam, so make sure that you tuck it inside. And then we're going to pin or clip the rest. Okay, so now we're going to sew all the way around. We're going to start at the top corner, backstitch, and then start sewing down. Now, one thing that is very important that we want to do for the lining that we did not do for the exterior is we really want to increase the seam allowance along this section here, and you want to increase it to 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch. It really depends on how thick your exterior shell is. Um, and the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want our lining shell to be baggy inside of the exterior shell. So if you're not sure, to be safe, you could do 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. But I tend to do somewhere in between 1/2 inch, 5/8. It really doesn't matter. The important part is that you start here at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch, sew down, and then just once I get past the bottom edge here of the top band, that's when I increase. And I keep that increase all the way around. And then when I get to the other side here, then I start to go back to my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, because you want the seam allowance at the top corners here to be 3/8 of an inch so that it matches the top edge of your exterior shell. And then also make sure that you backstitch here. I like to make this area strong, so I do sew it twice, rather 3 times. Okay, and then here's where I'm going to increase my seam allowance. Okay, so these are all sewn together. Now we're going to trim that seam allowance. And I don't really like cutting the top band here at this side seam, because I don't want that part to come apart. So I just start cutting just beneath it. Not taking enough away. I'm actually going to just cut a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so now our lining shell is done. And now we're going to attach the lining shell to our exterior shell. So I do want to open my zipper for this part, but I did not sew across the coil here. I don't want to accidentally pull off my zipper pull. So I'm going to do that right now. So that'll allow me to open it all the way. And before we do the next part, make sure that your interior zipper pocket zipper is open all the way. There should be a hole at the bottom. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to insert the exterior shell into our lining shell. So if the direction of your main zipper closure is important to you, if you want your bag to open from this direction or this direction, so you'll want to pay attention to that, because the direction that you have your, so I have my zipper to open from this direction, this direction. So I'm going to be placing it this way. That's how the direction that my zipper will open. That's the opening of the zipper here. So I'm going to insert that this way. Now, because your lining shell is smaller than your exterior shell, it will be a little bit of a tight fit, and you might have your exterior kind of bunching in there a little bit. That's perfectly fine. And now the important thing here is to try to center the side seam here in the middle of your connector, because remember we did the same thing here. We centered the connector over that side seam. So we're doing the same thing here. Actually, I might base these open. Okay, so now that those are basted open, I do find it makes it a tiny bit easier. So now I am centering that seam in the middle of the connector. And then I am putting a clip on either side so that it does not move. And then I turn this around and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I know it seems like it's a tight fit, but it will work. Okay, make sure that your rectangle rings are pointed down. So again, a clip on either side once I have that side seam centered. And then I'll be able to go ahead and clip the rest together. Okay, so now I'm going to sew along the top edge, sewing these together with the usual seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch. If you find it easier, you can sew this seam from the inside. I'm going to just sew it from the outside. Because I want the area where my connectors are attached to be extra strong, I'm going to sew this section twice. And I sew like less than 1/8 of an inch apart. Okay, so these are sewn together now. I am going to now reach in through the opening at the bottom of the zipper pocket. And that's how we're going to turn the bag right side out. So normally I would say sew the bottom of your zipper pocket shut, but I'm going to do it after because I want to change my thread color so it matches. So for now, I'm going to tuck this in and I'm going to do my top stitching. before I close the zipper pocket. I've got a little thread sticking out. Get rid of that. Okay, so tuck this in. Now, if you used fabric for your top bands, you would be able to press this top edge really nicely before top stitching. But if you're like me and you're using cork or vinyl or something that can't be pressed, what you can do instead is just roll the seam and then temporarily put a clip, so that we know that the edge looks really nice while we're top stitching. But yeah, if you used fabric, you could go ahead and just press the seam instead before you top stitch it. So one mistake I see often is to use a shorter stitch length while top stitching. It really is nicer and easier if you use a longer stitch length. So I usually use a stitch length of 4 when I am top stitching. Okay, so now I'm just going to do that top stitching all the way around. Okay, so there's the exterior done. And again, because I need gray thread to sew on my strap, I'm going to wait till the end to close up my zipper pocket, but I will not forget. So now you will need your piece of 1.5 inch wide webbing, and you're also going to need your rectangle slide. Now I realized at the beginning that I completely forgot about the fact that we need a metal zipper end to finish the end of our zipper. So we'll do that last. I just want to do this part first, and then we'll do that after we close the zipper pocket. So what you're going to start by doing is figuring out the length that you need. I always just do a standard length of around 54 inches for my crossbody strap. But depending on how low you like to carry your bag, if it's winter and you're wearing a very thick jacket, you might want to have it a bit longer. So the best way is to try it on and hold it with clips. Don't sew it, just hold it with clips temporarily and try it on and see what you like. So I'm using a nylon webbing, so I just like to make sure that I've heat sealed the ends. And I'm pretty sure that I pre-cut this strap to my favorite length. So there is no right side or wrong side to mine, but if your webbing does have a right side and wrong side, you might want to pay attention to that. So what the middle bar here of my slide, the curved side is the right side. So you want right side of the webbing facing up here, and the slide being right side facing up as well. And then pass this through. And then I like to fold it over onto itself, because even though this is heat sealed, it's ugly. I don't really want to see it. And this webbing is thin enough that I can fold it and sew it no problem. So I'm going to just push this over for a minute. So I'm folding over roughly an inch. And then I want this to be, so this, I've got about 2.5 inches here. Yeah, so it's like folded over 1.25 inch and then folded over 2.5 inches. But you could even do just 2 inches. I mean, it's up to you. There really is no mistake here. I just like to make sure that I have enough room to maneuver around the edge of my slide here, and that I'm sewing properly and attaching as much as I can of the folded over part in the middle. I'm going to just use some clips to hold that in place. Make sure when you're folding it over that all the edges here are nicely aligned as well. And when I sew this on, I like to sew a box of stitching. So I sew a whole box, and then I do an X in the middle. So I will show you this at the machine, how I sew this. So I do like to start by sewing the folded edge. And then I stop when I'm about 1/8 of an inch from this side here. Bring this over like this. And leave your needle in the down position and then stop and then rotate. And then when I sew down past the heat sealed end. And I sew across. And then again I stop 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And you'll notice I've given myself enough room so that the back of the foot doesn't interfere with the slide. Okay, so now I want to do my X. So this is the end where I started sewing. So I'm going to stop there and rotate and sew diagonally until I get to the other corner of stitching. Then stop and rotate and sew again along the top near the slide. And again, I'm stopping 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then again, I'm going to sew diagonally towards this corner. And then I'm stopping and I'm going to sew a second time. This is the very first line of stitching that we made. I'm sewing that again. Okay, stopping 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to just do a couple of back stitches. And then that's what that looks like. Okay, so now that we have the rectangle slide attached, this, where we see the folded edge, that's going to be considered the wrong side of my strap. So find the end. Now make sure when you're doing this that you're not twisting the strap. So you don't want to twist it like this. You want it to stay flat. Find the other end and pass it from the inside of the bag through the one rectangle ring. And then, without twisting it, pass that free end through the slide again. In one side, out the other. Like this. So see this way here, I can really make sure it is not twisted. Okay. And then from the outside, I pass this end in, and then I do the same thing, folding it over twice. So about 1.25 inch or so. And then again about 2.5 inches or so. And I'm using clips again to hold that in place. And then I'm going to sew exactly the same way as I did when I attached the webbing to the slide. I'm going to do the box with the X inside. Okay, so now our strap is attached. Okay, and now I'm going to change my thread color, and I'm just going to pop this out and open it. Makes it easier. So now I'm pulling this out of my zipper pocket, and you'll remember that we press the bottom edges so that they are folded, and that's just to make this next step easier. So you're lining up those bottom folded edges and using pins or clips to hold that. Now you have two options here. You can either hand sew this shut using some kind of blind stitch, but I'm a terrible hand sewer, so I like to do it with the machine. And what I do is I use a matching thread color, and I try to sew as close as I can to these folded edges, but making sure that I sew the two of them together. So very small seam allowance. And most importantly, use a matching thread color. It's way more forgiving. Okay, so the bottom edge is sewn shut. We can go ahead and just tuck in our pocket now. And the last thing we need to do is deal with the end of our zipper, because it's not the prettiest at the moment. I'm just also going to, so there's the interior of my bag now. All right, so we really want to finish the end of that zipper. I find the easiest thing is to use a metal zipper end. There's a million tutorials online on how to make a fabric casing for the end of the zipper, but these are rather inexpensive, and it just makes finishing the zipper so quick and so easy. So, whoa, tons of screws here. I keep all my spare screws in this container. You never know when you might need one. Okay, so the zipper ends, they look like this. I do sell these on my website if you're not sure, but any hardware seller will usually have these, and they call them either zipper ends or cord ends. So they look like this, little metal casing, hole inside, and then you're going to use a screw in this hole here. Now the screws are very, very tiny, and so you will need a very small screwdriver. This is called a teeny turner. I absolutely love it. Now, I do find this tail a bit long. I'm not a fan of really long zipper tails, so I like to trim mine so that it doesn't extend past my connector. But you can trim yours to whatever length that you would like. So I'm going to do it about halfway, and then I'm going to heat seal it because I've just cut it. And then you should also put a drop of glue inside the zipper end, so your zipper is less likely to come out. Now, normally I would use E6000 glue, but I don't seem to have that, so I'm just going to put it on. So put a drop of glue inside, not a lot, just a little bit. And this is the right side, and that's the wrong side. And so you want the right side of the zipper end to be where the right side of your zipper is. Okay, and then if you're having trouble getting all of the zipper tape inside the zipper end, I just kind of tuck it in with my seam ripper like this. But this seems to be pretty good. Okay, and then all you do is add in your teeny tiny screw, with your teeny tiny screwdriver. There we go, nice and tight. And there you have it. And your bag is done. So I hope that you enjoyed the bag, making the bag, and if you're participating in the sew along, I hope you enjoyed the sew along. I'm always available for questions. You can comment below the video or send me an email, which is on my website, and I'll be happy to help you out.